Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The worst kept secret in the NFL, other than that Aaron Rodgers wanted to be a Jet, was the Panthers were going to take Bryce Young number 1 overall. What will it take for him to be the guy in Charlotte? Also, the Colts took a risk early, and the Cardinals were wheeling and dealing on draft day. I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Locked On NFL Draft coverage is presented by Ultimate Football GM. You think you can run an NFL franchise? Visit ultimate-gm.com to play the ultimate NFL simulation game. Start your dynasty today. With the number 1 overall pick in the 2023 draft, the Carolina Panthers have taken Alabama quarterback Bryce Young. I'm Peter Bukowski with Julian Council from Locked On Panthers. And Julian, this has been an open secret for a long time now. And so why do you think the Panthers ultimately landed on Bryce Young as opposed to CJ Stroud or one of these other quarterbacks?
They looked at the tape from the last 2 years and saw that Bryce Young was the best quarterback in college football the past 2 seasons. I understand that CJ Stroud might have all the measurables you're looking for at 6'3", 220 pounds, strong-armed, accuracy. But when you watch Bryce Young, he makes magic on the field. Being able to take an Alabama offense that, honestly, outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, did not have that much NFL talent, and be able to drag them across the finish line in games at Texas this past fall, getting him to overtime in LSU and Baton Rouge, getting him down the field or a chance to win that game against Tennessee. Bryce Young did so much more with less this past season, a year after winning the Heisman Trophy. Arguably, he was more impressive this past year than he was in 2021 when he did win the Heisman Trophy there at Alabama. He's one of the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL, and now being here, but in college football, the S2 score that's been made a lot of recently, testing the 98th percentile. Look at a guy who can process. Look at a guy who can put the ball where it needs to be. They look at somebody who can maneuver the pocket and play off script, and they felt like this is a guy with the leadership, with the cool, calm demeanor who can be the franchise quarterback here in Carolina, hopefully for the next 10, 15 years.
The question with Bryce Young is going to be size. He's 5'10". He weighed in over 200 pounds at the combine. I don't know anyone who believes he played over 200 pounds at Alabama over the last couple seasons. So what are the reasons you think Carolina ultimately sold themselves on a guy who is going to be an all-time outlier as the number 1 overall pick in terms of size, and then has to go be their starting quarterback?
Yeah, it's a concern for sure, but Carolina, apparently they have a plan for him. And like last week during a press conference leading up to the draft, Scott Bitter, Dan Morgan, the assistant general manager, and Cole Spencer, who's director of scouting, they spoke to the media, and someone asked them, hey, Bryce Young, 5'10", 204, probably more 190, 195, as you mentioned, an outlier. We've never seen a player with his height and his weight have long-term success in the NFL. Not saying that it can't. The game has certainly changed, but they have a plan. Nutritionally, Scott Bitter talked about, hey, with age, he's going to add weight. We all know that as we get older, we add on weight. Bryce Young,
unfortunately true.
As an athlete, it's not going to really change. And you can look at a player like Russell Wilson, who has a thicker build, but he also weighed in at 204 11 years ago when he was drafted by Scott Bitter, John Snyder, Dan Morgan, all of them in Seattle, and he's now listed at 215 on the Broncos website. I don't know if Bryce Young will ever get to 215, but they believe that they can work with him nutritionally and strength and conditioning wise and get him to a manageable weight where he can be more durable. And they also look at the fact that Alabama, the only time he was ever injured was this past season against Arkansas, where he fell the wrong way, missed the game, came back against Tennessee and threw for 500 yards on his injured throwing shoulder. So it's not like he went to college, had a numerous amount of injuries, and that's been an issue going to the NFL. So they have a plan from nutritionally. We'll see whether it works, because the biggest and the brightest in the NFL, like Cam Newton, who was here in Carolina, have fallen apart because of how physical this game is. And the hope is that they can do enough to help Bryce Young be able to manage the next 5, 10 plus years here in Carolina as their franchise quarterback.
So what kind of offense can this team put together with Bryce Young at the helm?
We'll see what it's going to look like this year. I have my concerns. The wide receiver core is one of the worst in the NFL. It helps that you bring in Hayden Hurst, who is free agent from Cincinnati, and Miles Sanders, who can both supplement the passing game for Carolina. The best situation, though, is that they have a strong offensive line. Now, Austin Corbett, the right guard, he tore his ACL in Week 18, so there'll be concerns heading into Week 1 whether he'll be ready or not. But overall, the offensive line is very strong. And that's been a point of weakness the last couple of seasons. There's been conversations the last couple of drafts, whether the Panthers should have taken Justin Fields, should they have taken a flyer on a Kenny Pickett or some of the other quarterbacks last year. Those guys were not coming into a situation where they were going to have success with the 5 men in front of them. That will be the case now. And now with Frank Reich, who has, of course, played the position, he's been an OC, coached this position, having success, having won a Super Bowl with Deuce Staley by his side, who's the assistant head coach. And you add in Parks Frazier, who's the passing game coordinator, called plays for interim head coach Jeff Saturday last year in Indianapolis when Frank Reich was fired. You have Josh McCown, who's not that far removed from playing the position. And Andy Dalton is here as that bridge veteran quarterback who talked about earlier this week. Being in the same position that Bryce Young is now in, he can be that mentor and allow the Carolina Panthers to go about the process of bringing him along slowly. And then when the time is right, they can put Bryce Young out there.
Stay up to date all year on the Carolina Panthers by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Panthers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the Colts took a big gamble with their first pick. Before we get to that, the Ravens made a huge move right before the start of the draft. Looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and the calories? Then you need the best tasting protein bar ever, Built. You have to try them because you will not find a healthy snack that tastes any better than Built. I promise you, you will not. I have tried everything. These things taste like a treat. They taste like a candy bar covered in 100% real dark chocolate with flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, but only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and an incredible 17 grams of protein. I order mine from Built.com. I love the convenience of it. But if it's more convenient for you to go to Walmart and pick up a box, you can do that. Pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puff, or go to Sam's Club and you can get a 13-bar box. Why wouldn't you do that? What are you waiting for? Go get them right now. The Baltimore Ravens made their most important roster move on Thursday before the draft even started, locking up Lamar Jackson.
It is officially official. The Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson agreeing on a contract. Kevin Oestreicher of Locked On Ravens here. And it's an exciting time in Baltimore. The Ravens and Lamar agreeing on a 5-year deal, reportedly worth $260 million in total money, $52 million per season, which would make him the highest paid quarterback in that regard, $185 million in total guarantees as well. This ends a nearly 2-year contract saga. It now gives the Ravens options, depending on how the contract is structured, to potentially make another big move. It is a happy day here in Baltimore. The Lamar contract situation officially over. He is now a Raven for the next 5 seasons. For more on the Ravens and Lamar's extension, be sure to follow the Locked On Ravens podcast and subscribe on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
So much for all those reports that said there was a possibility of Will Levis going number 1 overall. Reddit conspiracies rarely end well. I wonder how the GameStop stockholders are doing. The Kentucky quarterback was not picked among the 31 selections made on Thursday night. Levis's left toe that caused him to miss 2 games last year was, quote, problematic for one team that considered him, according to reports. Another team believed Levis could manage the injury, but thought surgery would need discussion after the season. Levis was among the 17 players invited to attend the first round in Kansas City. Only 4 of those players didn't hear their name called. Levis, Alabama defensive back Brian Branch, Penn State cornerback Joey Porter Jr., and Georgia Tech defensive end Keon White. On the non-NFL draft front, the Boston Celtics are moving on.
It was a very difficult win, but it was a win, and the Boston Celtics are moving on to face the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm John Corrales of the Locked On Celtics podcast, and this was just a brutal, amazing, back-and-forth playoff game. Celtics took a big punch from Trae Young early on, but then Trae kind of faded as the game went on. He had 2 points in the fourth quarter. Meanwhile, the Celtics, after they got down 113 to 110, went on a huge 18-7 run. In there was an 11-0 run, fueled by Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and a couple of shots by Marcus Smart. The Stars took over when they needed to. The Celtics atoned for not closing this out at home, closed this out in 6 games. And hey, respect to the Hawks for fighting until the very end. The Celtics showed some poise. They showed some defensive intensity down the stretch. Joe Mazzulla with a big substitution. Grant Williams late in the game paying off there. He didn't play really any meaningful minutes at all in this series, and he comes in and plays some clutch minutes.
In the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Tampa Bay Lightning spoiled the party in Toronto for one more night.
The Lightning live to die another day as they take Game 5, 4-2. Mikey Eyssimont leads the way with the game-winning goal for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Andrei Vasilevskiy comes and saves the day, stopping 29 of 31 shots he faced. The Lightning will face off against the Toronto Maple Leafs down in Tampa this weekend to stay off another elimination game to get them closer to a Game 7. Follow the news around the Tampa Bay Lightning as they continue to stay in the playoff hunt against the Toronto Maple Leafs on Locked On Lightning.
And on the diamond, Shohei Ohtani was roughed up by the Oakland Athletics, but the LA Angels still found a way to win.
For years, Shohei Ohtani's pitching bailed out the Angels, but on Thursday, the Angels' hitting bailed out Shohei Ohtani's pitching. Imagine that. Hey, everybody, it's Mike Frisch, one half of Locked On Angels. The Angels win their third straight game on Thursday against the Oakland A's, 8-7. Shohei was on the mound. We expected dominance, and he was great through the first 3 innings. The Angels put a 5 spot on the board in the bottom of the third, and then Shohei, surprise, surprise, gave it back in the top of the fourth. The A's hit 2 home runs. He walked a few guys, had a few wild pitches, and it was a tight ball game for a while, but then Brandon Drury came through with some offense. He hit his 5th home run, and then Shohei Ohtani on the offensive side had 3 hits, and he almost hit a home run, which would have given him the cycle. That would have been incredible, but the Angels did hold on to win. Carlos Estevez got the save in the 9th, and they find themselves 2 games over 500, and John and I are going to talk all about this game and more on Locked On Angels. We hope you join us.
The Indianapolis Colts have selected Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson with the number 4 overall pick. We got 3 quarterbacks in the first 4 picks. I'm Peter Bukowski with Zach Hicks from Locked On Colts, and Zach has a big smile on his face because it seemed like this was the guy the Colts had targeted all along. Why does this make sense for Indianapolis with new coach Shane Steichen?
Oh, man, first off, I am over the moon right now. This is the perfect selection. I mean, I've gone on a lot of shows and stuff like that. I did something with Fran Duffy recently, too, where I was like, look, even if Stroud's on the board, the Colts are going to go Richardson. They have to go Richardson because this is the perfect fit for this offense. Shane Steichen, he's an adaptable coach. He'll do a lot of different things to reach his end goals, but he's a Norv Turner guy. He's an Eric Coryell type of guy. He wants to attack vertical. That is everything that Shane Steichen wants to do. Why not grab the freakiest athlete we've ever seen at quarterback that's going to get defenses into single high looks all day long? Oh, and by the way, he's also a really good deep passer as well. Like Anthony Richardson, for everything he's not, everything he is right now, is a highly athletic player that can attack down the field. Shane Steichen's got to be salivating looking at that. And I do not doubt whatsoever that Shane Steichen, if it came down to 2 players or it came down to anything, Shane Steichen said, get me this freak, get me this alien quarterback.
How much of this selection with Shane Steichen do you think is informed by his experience with Jalen Hurts, having been in Philadelphia, watching the maturity, the growth process there, and then ultimately last year blossom into a superstar talent that took his team to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, no, I think Philly has a big impact on this selection. One, because again, Steichen kind of figured out a mobile quarterback in Jalen Hurts, who, when he took over in Philly, Hurts had 200 snaps under his belt, and he was a 52% passer. He's a 52% passer back in 2020. He takes in Jalen Hurts, gets him up to the 60s in year 1, now gets him up to 68 last year % passer. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be the same exact thing for Anthony Richardson, but he finally, he kind of figured out how to work out that kind of passer. And then I think another thing with the Philly connection is Brian Johnson, the QB coach turned offensive coordinator. Shane Steichen has a close relationship with him, and Brian Johnson was at Florida with Anthony Richardson. So I don't doubt whatsoever he leaned on that connection. And if there were any questions whatsoever, I'm sure he asked Brian Johnson, like, what do you think of this kid? He has the talent. Can he be that next star? And ultimately, again, the Colts, they definitely believed in that, and they made him the 4th overall pick.
The last 2 years, it seemed like the Colts were on that veteran quarterback hamster wheel. First, it's Phillip Rivers, then Carson Wentz, then Matt Ryan. I guess Sam Ehlinger counts in there a little bit. Why was now the right time to hit reset on this? Because Jim Irsay seems like the kind of owner who wants these results now, but this feels like, okay, we're going to take our time, new head coach, now the franchise quarterback, and you move forward.
Yeah, what's actually fascinating about this all season is the Colts are not really in that we need to win right now mode. It's we were trying the Band-Aid route the last 3 years. Like everything was Band-Aid, Band-Aid, Band-Aid. And we were only looking forward to that next season. We were not really planning for the season out. And a lot of that is because Philip Rivers had way too much success in that one season in 2020, way too much success. So they kept thinking they were only just one more Band-Aid away from getting, a deep playoff run. Last year was kind of that gut check for everyone in the organization. It was, we are not just a quarterback away. We're not just a Band-Aid away. So we're going to bring in this young offensive coordinator to be our head coach, give him a 6-year deal, let him get his guy at quarterback. And we're going to start playing, yes, we want to have success in 2023, but our goal is not just 2023. Now it's also 2024, 2025, and 2026, and so on. So I think a lot of this process has been the Colts being like, look, we have time. Chris Ballard's on the hot seat. Shane Steichen's obviously not on the hot seat because he, just got here. You guys do your thing and put all your chips in on who you think could be the best quarterback. I don't care if they're the best quarterback in 2023. I care if they're the best quarterback in 2025, 2026.
Stay up to date all year on the Indianapolis Colts by subscribing to Locked On Sports today and Locked On Colts on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Cardinals were busy on the trade front in the first round. So we all know how ExpressVPN protects your privacy and security online, right? But there's something you might not know. You can also use ExpressVPN to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries. If you're like me, you've mostly run out of things to watch on Netflix, but this will change your world. This whole week, you could be watching The Office. Yeah, The Office on UK Netflix. It's simple to do. You just turn on the ExpressVPN app, which I basically always have on, change your location to the United Kingdom, and refresh Netflix. That's it. ExpressVPN lets you control where you want sites to think you are located. You can choose from almost 100 different countries. So just imagine all the Netflix libraries you can get through. And it's not just Netflix. ExpressVPN works with any streaming service. Hulu, BBC iPlayer, YouTube, you name it. There are hundreds of VPNs out there, but the reason I use ExpressVPN is because it's fast. I never even notice that it's on. And it works on all your devices, phones, media consoles, smart TVs, and more. You can watch what you want on the big screen or on the go. So if you want access to hundreds of new shows, go to expressvpn.com/locked right now, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/locked, expressvpn.com/locked to learn more. With the 6th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Arizona Cardinals, they move down, then they move back up, and they snag offensive tackle from Ohio State, Paris Johnson Jr. I'm Peter Bukowski, joined by Locked On Cardinals host Alex Clancy. And this was quite the GM maneuvering from the first-year GM in Arizona, Alex. The trade down and then the trade back up. Let's talk about the player here, Paris Johnson Jr. Why was this the pick in Arizona? What's the fit?
This was supposed to be the pick in 2020. This is supposed to be the pick in 2021. I don't say that tongue in cheek. I say that with supreme confidence because if Kyler Murray isn't protected, none of this works. And the fact that Monty Ossenfort, in the first 60 minutes of being GM on the clock in the 2023 NFL Draft, did more than Steve Keim did in the last 5 seasons, shows the trajectory of this organization as they are the Arizona Cardinals in name only moving forward. 6'6", over 300 pounds, can play interior from the guard and tackle position on the outside. It's a position that the Cardinals have desperately needed a boost in, and they hopefully get their 10, 12-year starter, whether it be at guard to start or moved outside after. And it's something that Kyler Murray desperately needs to play behind.
This was, though, a very talented tackle class at the top. It's not a very deep tackle class. So if you're the Cardinals and you just get this haul from Houston, what's the case, do you think, inside the Arizona organization to say, this is the guy we need to get, with the understanding that the buzz all Thursday was that Paris Johnson Jr. could be the pick at 3?
Yeah. And the interesting part about it is I think that they were worried about Philly the most because that's what Philly does. They build lines. They would not have passed on Paris Johnson Jr. even if Bijan Robinson was still there. It doesn't really matter. They wouldn't have got past 10. And the fact that they moved up, it was very clear in my mind, at least, that the only thing that mattered about the trade back was that future first. Everything else was kind of ancillary and could be used as bargaining chips in this draft. And all the Cardinals did was move down to 12 and then package 12 and 34 to move back up to 6 and get the guy they wanted that they probably wanted at 3. This was a masterclass by a first-time GM. Now, it's very early, but first step and then secondary step of getting a guy, masterclass.
There was a lot of discussion over the last few months that Will Anderson or Tyree Wilson, one of those guys, was going to be the pick at 3 if Arizona was able to, or was basically forced to stay there, because they were leaking it to any reporter that would listen. Hey, we would like to leave the 3rd overall pick. Thank you. So if one of those defenders, if Will Anderson, for example, had been there, do you think they would have considered staying at 3?
No. I think that the fact that they finally, this was an extinct volcano 96 hours ago with the number 3 overall pick. There was no way they were trading back. Everybody knew, and everybody was going to wait. And then the 48 hours before the draft, the magical nature of it, just everything starts to percolate. And now it may have been hotter than ever, and they just had to pick their suitor. And they were able to get a team who wanted to make an impact, wanted to get a defensive leader for the future to pair with DeMeco Ryans, first-time head coach in Houston, to completely change the culture there, because Houston needs a culture change maybe more than the Arizona Cardinals do, and that's a really difficult thing to do. So when it comes down to it, I feel like it was trade down no matter what, and luckily the Cardinals got a package that warranted trading outside of the top 10, and then what they did afterwards was just magic emotion.
Stay up to date all year on the Arizona Cardinals by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Cardinals on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And finally, the college football playoff is expanding to 12 games starting in 2024. The first round games will be held at either the home field of the higher seeded team or at another site designated by the higher seeded institution. These will be in December of 2024. The national championship games will be played January 20th, 2025 in Atlanta. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Now go find your favorite team's Locked On podcast and make them your second listen. Coming up Monday, which team comes away from the draft as the most improved? So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.